Okay, I've seen so many students do this, and it's like once you drain them, they're undercooked a little bit. You're never gonna get those lumps out of there. Okay, it's gonna probably be starchy glue and things like that. So always make sure they are thoroughly cooked. Over is better than under. Okay. Okay, so you've got these cooked potatoes in water. Okay, they're thoroughly cooked. I'm gonna grab my my bell pepper. It's getting too hot for my fingers. So now I'm gonna set it down on the last side. And there she is. She's going nicely. It's roasting beautifully. You can't even hardly see it on my dark stove. Okay, back to potato puree. I strain those potatoes, and then I put them onto a stovetop on a low flame, and I let the steam evaporate out of them. Occasionally, excuse me, I'm all hiccuping now. I go in with a rubber spatula, one of these guys, okay? And I'm just gonna turn my potatoes over and release more steam. I'm trying to get moisture out of these guys. What I'm looking for is the inside of baked potato dry. That's what I'm trying to develop here. So I'll give it another turn. I don't want to overwork it or anything. I'm just letting steam escape, and I just keep cooking them until they get pretty darn dry, and I can touch them and get like that mealy potato starch on my fingers like the inside of a baked potato. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. Once I get them all dry like that, man, I can just work in butter, cream, cheese, any of that naughty stuff, you know, that I want. I see people using milk all the time in mashed potatoes. Sorry, I've never really done the milk thing. You know, I do things like cream. Even cream has a little bit of water in it. Okay, and that water, I just try to get water out of this thing. I want fat in there, right? And so I tend to avoid things like milk and which is mostly water and things like that. You know, I want butter. I'll give you an example of why, right? I used to use milk way back in the day, and I would hold my potatoes hot on the line, and about 5 minutes later, they're set up. The starch soaked up all the water in the milk. And so I adjust it again. I get some milk hot and some re-season it and all of that. And I try my potatoes again, and they're set up like cement again 10 minutes later, right? The starch just keeps soaking up that water. But if I work fat into it, like heavy cream, butter, and cheese, and all that stuff, hey, that fat just sits in there with the starch. It doesn't soak it up, right? And so you get these really nice mashed potatoes that are fatty and good and feel good on your palate. It's awesome, okay? So I have my bell pepper in this cup right here, this rather large cup, and I'm gonna turn that over to let it steam. I'm gonna get rid of a few potatoes here, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Here's the cup inverted on my counter with a bell pepper underneath it. It's steaming inside there. We just charred the outside, but the inside is not very cooked. And so it's kind of steaming in there to cook the inside and soften it. And this will be ready to eat once it's done. Again, I don't like a sauteed bell pepper. I like a roasted pepper, much better flavor, okay? So we were just talking about potato puree, and I'm still kind of talking while we're looking at our, while we're baking off this casserole. I'll be getting into dinner here shortly. The mashed potato, once I get it all nice and dry, I work in the fat and all of that stuff till it's a nice consistency. I adjust my seasoning with it, and that's pretty much it. That makes mashed potato. That puree I can do other things with, though. Instead of working butter into it, I can add a few eggs to it and maybe a little bit of butter to it, and I can add flavors to it, and I can pipe that stuff out. And because there's egg in it, I can bake this off now, and it'll brown a little bit, and it'll set up its shape, okay? This is something that we call duchesse. We're making a dauphinoise in the oven right now. Right now, I'm talking about a duchesse, and it's kind of like a potato croquette. I add that egg into the mashed potato, basically, or the potato puree, flavor it up with, say, cheddar cheese, scallion bacon, or something like that, and then I pipe that stuff out, and then maybe cut it into little lengths, and then I like to freeze it, and then the next day I can bread these things and deep fry them. And so those are what croquettes are. It's like cheddar, bacon, mashed potato inside, crispy, crunchy breadcrumb on the outside. They're the bomb. It's really a nice treat and snack. So those are just a few examples of things I can do with potato puree. I can thicken soups with it and things like that. So making potato puree is a base technique for other things, including mashed potato, if that makes sense. Okay, mashed potato is it branches off. Okay, let's check out our dauphinoise. Okay, it's probably been going about 20 minutes now. Now, I told you my cream is pretty over full here. And so I'm going to pull this lid, I got to set it down somewhere. And there are my potatoes, okay? They're cruising right along. I don't think they're done. Just looking at them, I can tell they're not done. Oh, they're getting very close, actually. It's a little liquidy. You can see all of this browning around the outside. That is cream browning. So this is going to be picking up a beautiful golden brown top. I think this is cooked enough to where I don't need my lid anymore, okay? So it's softened enough. Once this softens, you go ahead and put it back in for another 10 to 15 minutes to get brown on top, okay? And so that's what we're looking at right there. I think what I'm going to do is kind of manipulate some of this, though. Some of that cream in the middle, kind of basting it. This isn't a very good basting implement. But some of the potatoes just look a little dry, right? I don't have this problem so much when I use straight cream, but not all of us have that. So I'm just kind of basting with extra cream there. Okay. So it's going back in. And it's cruising right along, okay? We're going to check it again in about 20 more minutes, okay? And I think I'm kind of done talking about potatoes. We talked about two different kinds of potatoes and what they're used for. Again, waxy potatoes were for those preparations where you need to hold your shape, an oven roasted potato, a potato salad, something along those lines, okay? The waxy potatoes, again, have those thin, smooth skins, okay? The russeted potatoes or russet potatoes and other types of russeted potatoes, those are good for frying, those are good for baking, and those are good for making purees because you can just evaporate the water out of them and they get super dry. It's like the inside of a baked potato, and then you can work in all this fat and beautiful stuff, right? And so that's kind of how we handle potatoes in a kitchen, okay? I talked about a few different cooking applications. We talked about the baking. I talked about the puree. I talked about the rissoles, par cooking a little bit before you go in the oven. And by the way, you can do a one-step rissoles potato where you just toss it in oil and go in the oven, but I find that the outside is kind of like tougher and chewier and kind of leathery like, whereas if I do that pre-blanch form, the outside is more like French fry. It's more like potato chip, okay? So you decide what you like, hard and leathery or potato chip and crunchy, right? That's the bomb, okay? So it's all up to you, okay? So let me see. So that was our whole deal with the with potatoes, okay? Let me go ahead, take another sip, and I'm gonna start getting dinner together. We're gonna start caramelizing some onions down for a little project, for just to go on the side. That's gonna be my vegetable tonight, and then we are going to sear off this beautiful, beautiful sirloin that I have here. So that is where we are going. I also need to clean my bell pepper that I have over here. Okay, so let me see. I have my onion right there. I need to get a pan on the fire. So let me go ahead and pick one. I think I'll use this fella right here. I like this guy because he's a little bit short and I feel like you guys can see into him. Otherwise, I like a pan with a handle on it, okay? Now, what I'm doing is I'm getting ready to sear some onions, caramelize some onions. We saw a French onion class before, so this is going to be review for anybody that saw that. I'm starting by getting my pan hot before I'm even cutting my onions, okay? It takes a long time to get that pan hot, so I just threw it on the fire, and I'm just throwing it on about 2 out of 10, okay? By the time I get an onion cut, this guy's going to be a little bit warm, and it won't take us so long to get where we need to go, okay? I'm going to go ahead and grab my onion, and something I forgot was my cooking fat, and I've got a little mixture of chicken and bacon fat right here. There's a little duck in there as well. Okay, so I think many people that have seen me before, that know me, have seen me do an onion before, but I'll do it again just real quick. Getting that nice onion stance. I want to rinse that blade off a little bit. I still have a little bit of starch on there from that potato. Bad chef. Drying off. Drying off. And I think I'm going to steel this blade as well. Let me show that to you guys as well. I kind of hold the handle way back. And again, I say this in a lot of videos, use the whole steel, use the whole blade. Do it with me. Yeah. Okay. I go backwards. I'm pulling back. And there we go. I'm going to give that a little wipe. And here I go with my onion. Sorry about that. Need to get my little mise en place together, okay? So there's my grip. There I am holding that handle again, okay? Or holding that blade again. The fingers just kind of wrapped around the handle. I'm attacking the South Pole and the North Pole here. Here goes the North. And then I'm taking off the South Pole. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the entire root end here because I want this onion to come apart. Sometimes I leave the woody stem on there to hold the onion together. I'm going to hold on to those pieces. I always throw them in a stock pot. I've got a big old bin for my next stock in the fridge right now, in the freezer. So I'll be making stock any day here in the Quarantine Kitchen. Quarantine Kitchen Happy Hour. Okay, and here I am. I'm going to cut this guy in half and grab some of that skin and pull it on off. Oh, come on, baby. There we go. Come on. I hear bells. Let's do this. There we go. I'm just going to take that mangled piece off and throw it in a stock pot. And then here's the rest of my peel. And again, onion is my vegetable tonight, along with this bell pepper. It's what I had around. Don't have any green veggies around right now. I have carrots. Mrs. Nelson doesn't like carrots. She doesn't want that for a veg. So we're doing peppers and onions. I can eat pepper and onion, roasted pepper and onion with a steak. That makes sense to me. All right, so we're working on this. Our potatoes are inside. I have been heating this pan up. I'm getting ready to start cutting. And I think I want, well, I'll have long pieces for this, okay? This is a full steak. We're caramelizing these onions just like we did for onion soup. And I don't want to have thin pieces. I want my pieces fairly thick. So look how thick I cut that guy right there. These are going to cook down, and I want them to have a little body when they cook down. Now, I'm kind of angling my knife as I do this. You guys might be noticing that. You don't have to do that. You can just go straight down. I'll give you an example of straight down. Boom. That works. Okay, if you want to do it that way. But you can see those pieces, they're a little bit thick. They're not super thin. They're not paper thin. Paper thin will cook down to mush. We don't want that. Okay, I'm going to grab a little spoon here. And I'm going to throw some fat in my pan for searing. Ring, ring. Smells like Chinese New Year, or it sounds like Chinese New Year. Okay. So I've got a good amount of fat in the pan, and it's melting up, and I'm going to go ahead and turn up my heat. If you have seen any of my classes before, heck, I do a little bit of searing in almost every class, okay? Searing is about high heat, small amount of fat, and we are looking for golden brown here, okay? So I'm getting up to searing temperature with these onions in the pan. Getting up to that temp, it's popping just a little bit. Got my onions. I could break them up a little while I wait. I'm not a patient man. I'm a patient man. I just don't like to use my patience. And I think I can go ahead and start dropping things in. You guys hear that sizzle? That's what I'm looking for. That's it. That is a very comforting sound to me. I know my pan is hot enough. And I'm going to go ahead and spread those onions out. This pan's almost shaped like a wok, so the edges are picking up some heat too. There's a good amount of fat. I'll get a little closer in. And they're just cruising along. You can see I stepped away from the onions so they can develop a little color. Step away from the onions. And so you guys get the idea. Okay? So they're going to be cruising along while I talk about this bell pepper here. Maybe I'll show you that again. Let me show you that again. Because I just tossed it. There's a tiny bit of color in there already. Already getting a tiny bit of color. I don't know if you can see that. I'm actually going to turn this down to about 8 out of 10, okay? It's going a little bit intense right now. It's a little intense. And I'm going to go ahead and clean up my bell pepper. So it's in the container. And let me just make a little room before I do this thing. Scene change. This is where the music comes in. This is where I need a band. Woohoo, dream weaver. Oh yeah, definitely need a band in here. Tossing my onions around. Let me show you that, what that looks like. I'm just kind of moving it back and forth, or you can use a spoon. When you're done tossing, spread it out and step away. Let it cruise. All right, so I'm going to move this over so you guys can see a little bit. And I'm going to start cleaning up this bell pepper, okay? I'll get rid of that cup. And the bell pepper, you can see the skin just comes right off. I did this in another video, and so I'm just going to do this real quick. This one's a review of a lot of stuff, really. The potato was the new ground today. As we move forward in Quarantine Kitchen Happy Hour, I'll be doing other potato preparations that we just talked about. Maybe mashed potato would be a nice one for the next. Now notice I'm not using water to peel this off. That skin is just coming off. If I use water, I'm going to wash away that excellent, excellent charred flavor. So my pepper's done. I'm using water on my hand, not on the pepper. And there it is on my board. Let me toss these onions again. My onions are getting a little bit on the darkish side, so I'm going to go ahead and just hit them with a tiny splash of water. I'm going to be using red wine later to make a little quick sauce, but I don't want that in my onions. I don't want a red wine sauce and a red wine onion. So I just wet those onions just to slow them down a little bit. Some of them were darker than others, so that water is going to help. It's going to kind of deglaze some of that color and even it out. I'm going to let that liquid evaporate out of there, and they're going to start deglazing again, or start caramelizing again. So there they are. You can see the water is a little bit brownish in there, and that'll evaporate pretty quickly. And I'm going to go back to my bell pepper. The bell pepper I'm just going to cut in half lengthwise, and I'm going to get rid of all of those seeds. Here, I'll show you how I get the seeds out. Here's the sink. And I just popped that little bell out of there. I call that the bell. And then there's a bunch of seeds. I turn my pepper inside out, and I backhand it a little bit into the sink. So I'm slapping it. Slap your pepper. Hashtag pepper slap. There we go. Rinse it off so I can get to the next step. I got to wipe my board down. It's got a few little pepper seeds on it. And then I got to cut up my bell peppers. I want my bell peppers to be in lengths similar to my onions over here. Speaking of onions, take a look. They're cruising along. They still haven't evaporated that liquid out, but that's all right. That's softened them up a little bit. And that water's almost gone. They're going to start browning again. The color in the pan looks a shade darker than it did 2 minutes ago. So back to my bell peppers. Now, I've got little bitty pieces on the ends that are kind of funky. Sometimes we get rid of that stuff. Around my house, I'll be honest, I just utilize that in my recipes. I don't worry about the perfect cuts, but just in case you guys are, I'm going to cut this about in half, and that's going to give me pieces about the length of my onion. And then I'm just going to cut them down into a julienne. I've kind of stacked them on top of each other, and I'm making them about as wide as my onion pieces were. And that'll be my side tonight. And it'll just be kind of room temp. I don't have to have it piping hot, just over my steak. My beautiful V. Miller sirloin steak. And here we go on those last cuts. My bell pepper's almost done. That's a vegetable. It's a functioning veg for the quarantine kitchen. I have a general rule when I'm doing vegetable, though. When I'm composing a plate, my vegetables, I usually make it a rule to have at least one green vegetable. So it's like give me a green vegetable and a non-green vegetable minimum on the plate, okay? That's a good general rule if you're, just kind of cooking at home. I think I'm just going to work the rest of my bell pepper into it. I don't want to waste that, and it's not going anywhere else. So I'm just going to kind of, while we're waiting, I'm just going to kind of slice this up and mix it in. This isn't for a 5-star restaurant. It's for Quarantine Kitchen here. But I did show you how to get a nice cut, a decent cut. But I don't want to waste that. That's food. That is food. I think what I shall do is just put those in a bowl. And they are going to go into this onion here shortly. I would kind of like to take another look at our quarantine casserole inside there. But I need to look at these onions real quick too, because they are starting to get a little dark on the bottom. Let me get the camera on them. And I got to do a little station maintenance here. Things are getting a little fuzzy here. I got to wipe my board down. My pan is a little bit dark. I'm going to add another drop of water in there just to deglaze it, just to control the color in my pan. I'm going to ease up on the heat here and let those onions continue, okay? So every time I do that deglaze, it kind of evens out the color in there. They're getting a little dark around some of the edges, and so I just turned it down a little bit. I might do one more little deglaze, kind of even out that color a little bit more. You guys saw me doing these tricks when I was making French onion soup in another class, possibly. Okay, I kind of softened my golden brown there. Looking better, a little more even. And we're looking good. I got to clean up my kitchen here, my board, so just keep watching those onions, guys. I wish I could field some questions here. There's the board and a wipe down. We're almost ready to start cooking again. I think my onions are almost done. And so those are just going to be served over the top of my steak with some bell peppers, but I'm going to make a red wine sauce to go with them. So I'm almost ready to start playing with that. I need to get, where is that? That's right. I'm going to be using a cast iron pan to do my steak. And I feel like my onions are about done. Let's take a look at them, guys. I haven't seasoned these guys yet. I'm just going to do a little salt in there and a little bit of pepper. And I think I'll leave them at that, just very, very plain. And I will finish them with a little bit of extra virgin olive oil. So a little salt going in there now. I haven't salted these at all yet. A little bit of pepper. And this is a pepper blend, actually. I haven't told you this yet, but this is a blend of black pepper and green pepper in here. It's like a 3-to-1 ratio, black with an occasional green peppercorn in there. So it's got a little different flavor profile here and there. I think my onions are about there. I'm not going to blend the bell peppers into this until the very last second. Otherwise, those bell peppers are going to take over the taste of the onion in there. And everything is going to taste like bell pepper. If I mix them at the last second, those bell peppers will still have their own taste. The onions will still have their own taste. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start heating up my pan, and I'm going to check out my gratin in the oven. So I'm just throwing about a 2 out of 10 underneath my stainless steel, my cast iron pan. My water's running. My onions are in back, and here comes my casserole. Okay, perfect timing, guys. Couldn't be happier. Okay, come take a walk with me, won't you? Look at that potato gratin, okay? No cheese on top, just the cream is browned there. That cream has a little lactose sugar in there, and that browns up beautifully in there. Now, very important, if I try and take a slice out of this casserole right now, the whole thing's gonna melt. I call this the lasagna principle, okay? Anytime you've ever made a lasagna, if you try to slice into it right now and plate that thing, the whole thing is just going to melt apart, right? And so any casserole, whether it's this, whether it's lasagna, anything, it needs some resting time. So this thing's going to be sitting around a good 15 minutes. Hey, that's perfect. I need to cook a steak and get all this stuff onto a plate later anyway, okay? So that's what's going to happen. It's all coming together, okay? Now, I've turned off my oven. I want to serve on hot plates later on. And so I'm going to go ahead and start warming plates. I think I need a bigger plate than usual. I don't like my big plates. I'm going to use these old blue ones, that style. So those are on deck. I have my onions. Let me kind of show you everything. So I have my onions back there. I have the bell peppers. They're going to go into those onions at the very last second, okay? So bell peppers. There is my gratin casserole. It is looking beautiful, and it's resting for a good 10 minutes or so before we even cut into it. The next thing I want to show you all is my beautiful, beautiful steak, okay? We're going to be doing this steak in my cast iron pan in moments. So here it is. These are sirloin steaks, and they're just kind of oddball shapes. They don't both match. Again, it's a whole beast butcher shop, and sometimes, you know, when you get these off-market cuts, which, you know, sirloin is not so much an off-market cut, but it's not a New York. It's not a ribeye, right? It's not one of those big money steaks, right? And so these sirloins, you know, they have a little bit of an oddball shape. They don't match because he doesn't have a whole box of sirloins in the back where he can find two that match. It's just what he has that comes in. It's like the butcher shops of old, okay? It's actually really, really cool. These steaks, I pulled them out of the wrapper long ago, and I pre-salted them liberally. So that seasoning has been able to work into it. Now, we've talked about this in other classes. I tend to pre-season my steaks and chops and things like that ahead of time, and they tend to hold or retain their moisture a lot better during the cooking process than steaks that were just seasoned at the last second. Okay, it's kind of like the way brined items tend to hold onto their moisture too. Okay, and so that's what we're looking at. All that is on these is salt. And quite frankly, when I'm doing steaks from VMillerMeats, oftentimes, you know, Stemple Creek beef, something like that, it's a unique dining experience. I don't want big flavors that are going to overtake this. I don't want to throw down a bunch of fajita mix on this stuff. I want to taste the meat, right? Although you can. I'm not saying you can't, but in this case, I just want to taste that straight beef that's coming straight from Marin out there, nothing but grass fed, okay? And so it's just going to be salt and a goodly amount of pepper, and I'm going to do the pepper more at the end than in the beginning, okay? So right now, just salt. It's a little bit wet, okay? When I salt the steaks, a little moisture does come out, but then later on when it's cooking, it's not losing that moisture so much. So I'm going to pour a little of that juice off. And I'm going to go ahead and start drying this meat a little bit and let I'm letting my pan heat up even more. I'm going to go ahead and kick the pan up to about, well, 10 out of 10, maybe even 11. I might even go to 11. I hope none of you guys are playing around with 11 out there. Don't try that at home. Okay, so I'm drying my meat off. Let me show you that. Drying that meat, just a little paper towel. Dry, 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 get all in his armpits and everything. The drier it is, the better sear that we can generate, okay? You might have seen that in the Julia Child movie that was out a little while ago. I watched it for the second time not too long ago. And that was one of the things they talk about, you know, dry meat, wet meat does not